Hello and welcome to this episode of Inside Legal ESG. My name is Pamela Cone and I'm fortunate to serve as the host of the Inside Legal ESG podcast series. We are so lucky to have with us today two really good friends of mine, the co-founders of Stories Evolved, Aimee Girdwood and Christina Bartholomew. Aimee joins us from Johannesburg, and she also serves as a senior associate at the Cambridge Institute for Sustainability Leadership. Christina is joining us today from London, and she serves as a teaching fellow at Omnis Education London School. So we're going to have a lot to talk about. Welcome, Christina, and welcome, Aimee.
Thank you, Pam.
I would first love to hear, thank you. I would first love to hear from you. How did you come together and how did Stories evolve? How did it start?
I think we have a great origin story, so I'm really happy to discuss this because I think it's, on the one hand, so interesting that we were having these parallel thoughts from different parts of the hemisphere, you know? And I was teaching sustainability to students, trying to understand as much as I could about it, and really wondering, where are the lawyers in this conversation? Aimee, separately, was working and had been working for many years to develop her consulting business in this space, and also just developing a passion, but she was also having those same questions. So when I took a course at Cambridge Institute for Sustainability Leadership, and she was one of the tutors on the course, I remember from afar thinking, I must speak with her. I have so many questions. I really want this perspective. And so after the course, I reached out to her, and that began kind of fireworks. It was just, we had so much to say to one another, so much, I think, to learn from one another, our different perspectives. South Africa has a very different view on decarbonization than I would as an American / British citizen. So that our relationship really grew out of that. And a couple of points there. I mean, the first is that technology really enabled this collaboration. Were it not for maybe COVID, were it not for the facility with which we can use Zoom, I don't know if things would have happened. So it really felt, you know, when you ask yourself, why us, why now? The why now was very clear. And that's because we actually can work together.
And did this all happen right at about the same time of COVID or right before COVID?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah.
So it was during COVID. And then we worked with a company called Impact International to develop a roundtable event in this quest that we both had for where are the lawyers. And our firm belief that lawyers are problem solvers. Lawyers have a duty to be engaged in these larger discussions about the world. You know, the lens that we bring to problems is not monofocused, or at least it shouldn't be. There's always this background of what is our obligation, where do we fit into society as lawyers? And that recognition, I think, really fueled this conversation. And, you know, our work together has evolved in many different ways. But I think that it really, the fundamentals are that we have a real respect for the profession. We really like being around other lawyers, I think. You know, everybody, it's a funny profession, but it tends to draw, I think, really a lot of intelligence and a lot of different perspectives. And we love drawing on that.
And
Aimee?
I should have mentioned in the beginning that you're both lawyers, right? Christina is a recovering lawyer. Aimee, are you still practicing in some respects?
No, I'm also a recovering lawyer. I'm the non-practice.
Okay.
Aimee, do you have any anything you wanted to add to that story? I'm sure I missed a couple of beats.
You know, Christina, I think it's spot on. I mean, it really is just the most fantastic story about the ability of two people with a common passion and a common kind of question and interest to connect, in a way that I would never have expected. Tutoring on, it was on the Business Sustainability Management Program, which is one of the executive courses that Cambridge offers. And it was just, I think sometimes things are just about timing. And I had been thinking for a while, as a lawyer, I moved out of practicing law in order to move into the sustainability space, because at the time, and I'm talking 2010, there weren't opportunities to be a lawyer and work as a lawyer and advise on sustainability. It was either you needed to be an accountant looking at reporting and measuring and integrated reports and sustainability reports, or it was more the role of a scientist or an engineer looking at, well, how do you actually make a process more efficient, for example. And so I'd kind of gone down this road of being involved in policy work and trying to kind of create an environment where more people would move into the space, working with governments and NGOs, then doing my master's at Cambridge and becoming involved in their executive education program, but all the time noticing that I was very much in the minority. And so it was just the most awesome opportunity to connect with somebody via the ether, so to speak.
Yes.
Who was thinking the same things and asking the same questions.
And I think that question that you both were asking, like, where are all the lawyers? Certainly that's changed, because I think now lawyers are all over this, some more experienced and skilled than others. But I think certainly most lawyers now understand that this should be, if it isn't yet, it should be embedded in the way they practice law, the way they advise clients, the way they conduct contracts and mergers and acquisitions and due diligence. And it's all, and it should be embedded in the practice of law. I want each of you to touch a little bit on the chapter that you've recently contributed to this book, and it's a mouthful, so I had to write it down. The Routledge Handbook of Global and Digital Governance Crossroads, Stakeholder Engagement and Democratization. I knew I was going to stumble over that word, democratization.
It is a mouthful.
Yeah. So tell me about the chapter you contributed.
Thank you, Pam. So coincidentally, that was another opportunity that kind of grew out of involvement with Cambridge. And one of the students that I worked with on another executive course was Professor Preti Mahitra, and I think I'm pronouncing her name incorrectly. But she is a specialist in governance, and she works with business students, and she worked at a place called MICA in India, which is an incredible place looking at business and innovation and how ideas are evolving. And at the time, Christina and I were just kind of starting our foray into not only where are all the lawyers, but also kind of what is the role of lawyers? What is their responsibility? Do they have agency to help solve these challenges, to contribute to a more sustainable future? Or are we agents of instruction, where we merely do what our clients ask us to do? And so the chapter was really born out of our argument, which is the latter, that we believe that as lawyers, we have the power, we have influence in terms of our relationship with our clients, our position of trust with our clients, the kinds of discussions, the kinds of moments that we find ourselves in. Pam, you mentioned kind of mergers and acquisitions, or it could be a seat at a boardroom table, sitting advising a board on, whether or not to proceed with the litigation, or how to respond to a claim, or whether to buy or sell a certain company. And so what that chapter really is about is it's about the role that we believe lawyers have, not just to take instructions, but as professionals, and given our fiduciary duty and our responsibility to our clients to really help them manage a changing environment. It's really to help them with that horizon analysis and to have that overview of how their context is changing, so that we can provide them with advice that is not just technically excellent, but is actually relevant to their day-to-day and to the responsibilities they themselves have as a business, and if they're directors as fiduciaries of that business.
I think this question of fiduciary duty is, for us, that was really this hinge point, because recognizing that an attorney's fiduciary duty would extend to something maybe larger than the immediate request that was put in front of them has also extended to governance, right? And the role that boards have in shepherding a business through the future. And this, I think, addresses this issue of how we can use the existing architecture that we have in place to simply ask the question slightly differently, so that we are rewiring things, but using the existing framework for making decisions. And that is questioning, if we are making ethical decisions, is the ethical consideration myopic, or is it larger? And how does it touch on not just that singular focus of what a company is supposed to do, which is to have a return on investment for their shareholders, but also who else are they responsible for? And what are some of the maybe intangible aspects that they might be responsible for? But their customers, their employees, their suppliers, the government, the communities that they're working in. So using that existing frame to really think, how can we harness that duty to have it mean something more?
I love that
Christina,
you talked about is it just a small element in front of us, or is it the larger picture? And I think the same question could be asked for timeline. Are we just focused on quarterly returns, or are we focused on long-term viability of the company? Because frankly, if making decisions focused on quarterly returns is at the expense of the long-term viability of your company or of society or of biodiversity, you're really not acting in the best interest of your shareholders long term. You may be short term, but not long term. Aimee, you were about to say something.
Sorry, Pam. I was just going to say that I love the point that Christina made about the use of existing infrastructure. I think that's spot on. And I think if we look at kind of the economy and business as a system, and there are all these players, the investors, the regulators, the funders, the shareholders, the trade unions, the private equity funds, and the common kind of point in all these different relationships are the lawyers who are advising in various different capacities on various issues. And so there's enormous potential there. There are these existing nodes of influence within the system. And, I think sometimes what's quite hard when we talk about ESG and sustainability and, and transformation and a sustainable future, it all sounds very abstract. But actually, the point is that in that existing infrastructure, there are existing tools and mechanisms like contracts, that we can use as a lever to start influencing and embedding some of these changes in how things are done. And that, again, is where lawyers are directly involved.
I love your point where you say on all of those situations, lawyers are at the table. That is why I feel that the legal profession should be leading in this space, because you guys probably know Timothy Wilkins from Freshfields, but he puts it like this: lawyers have the power of purpose, they have the power of people, they have the power of the pulpit, and often they have the power of the purse. They can influence things that are happening around them in society through their client work that will make a difference in society. So all of us feel that way, that the legal profession is really at the hub of all of this. So tell me, what trends are you seeing in ESG in the work that you're doing with clients?
I'm happy to start. I think that the American political backlash is impacting things globally. It's diminishing some ambition. It's making businesses a little bit quieter about their efforts. It's making law firms a bit quieter, I think. And it's unfortunately giving some ammunition to the skeptics that exist in any organization, that this is something that is too much, a third rail, something that's too much of a hot button issue. I think that to narrow this incredibly complex and interdisciplinary topic into something really narrow, and then to be able to make comments or pot shots about it, I think is really unfortunate.
And I would say that that is not only true with those who think that ESG is really just DE&I. There are also those who think ESG is really just carbon footprint, or
Exactly.
ESG is really just we have to have a code of conduct, right? It's all of those, but it is none of those exclusively. It is, like you said, a very holistic web.
And so that's the danger and the opportunity, Pam, for lawyers. If you think about the business that we're in, which is really traditionally helping our clients understand and manage and mitigate risk, and increasingly is really about helping them access, I think, future opportunities. That's really how clients, I think, see the role of lawyers evolving, is they're looking not for technical legal experts per se. What they're looking for are people who understand their business and understand the context of their business and can help them thrive within that context. And so, you know, the issues are many, and that's why it is so important for lawyers to understand the nuances of what these, you know, what the ESG issues look like in the different contexts for the different sectors. And so Christina and I spent quite a bit of time doing that kind of work with different sectors within law firms, whether in Africa or in the UK, so that lawyers have a sense whether they are advising in the healthcare space or in the transport and logistics space or in the insurance space, what actually are the nuances of these various issues within that context. And I mean, I think the point about, you know, ESG or sustainability, as I actually prefer to call it, I mean, I know there's so much hype around ESG, and you're right, Pam, there are so many lawyers who are now, and other companies and organizations who are kind of operating on in the context of this kind of growing and expanding understanding of ESG. And I think what's happening now with the kind of backlash against ESG is this sense that ESG is so much more than one particular thing. And there are faults with ESG. There are difficulties, whether it's about kind of uncertainty and measurements and metrics. But I think the crucial point is that the issues that underpin this increasing importance of ESG and sustainability more broadly are here to stay. They are, you know, if anything, compounding and expanding, both in terms of their risk to reputation, you know, to performance under contracts, and indeed to financial related issues. So these issues are only going to grow in importance. And so a lawyer cannot go forward and fulfill their duties as somebody who is really acting in the best interests of their clients without having a good sense of what this means for the work that they do and for the work that their clients do.
And I would say, on top of that, I was speaking to somebody a couple of days ago, and she said, you know, at some point, or at what point will a client say, well, I signed this contract 3 years ago. What did my lawyer know then, or what should he have known about the risks of XYZ, and why did he think it was okay for me to sign this contract, right? At some point, at what point is it a professional liability to not engage in all things ESG when advising clients? Christina, you were about to say something.
Yeah, that's such a good point. That really is, I think, really salient. We're talking about trends, and I think that we have to think about artificial intelligence because I think that we're going to see a significant involvement in AI, with AI for the kind of issues and things that Aimee and I are working on. On the one hand, it gives us incredible opportunities to sort of, I think, to help demonstrate, to use data to help demonstrate the business case for why this is so important, to better model solutions in this area. I think that's going to be very exciting. It worries me that AI could lead to a bit of competence greenwashing. You know, I've plugged something in, and now I know everything I need to know about ESG for my client, and that's simply not the case. It is a tool. It's a great tool to upskill yourself, but there's nuance that I don't think is faithfully recorded in the internet yet, and that's probably because it's such a new discipline, that I think you still need the experts and you still need advisors. And occasionally when you meet people and they say, well, it's not rocket science, is it? And I think, no, it's not rocket science, but it's really interdisciplinary and really complex, and people that have some experience in this.
Yes, so important.
Could I add to that point?
Yes.
Because I think the point of artificial intelligence is such an interesting one. And it's something that, of course, the legal sector, amongst all other sectors, are grappling with. And I think what can't be denied is if you look at the prospect and the opportunity of large language models to do a lot of the work that we as lawyers do more quickly, more accurately, and more cost effectively. So where then does that leave the legal profession? And my argument is, well, then it really comes down to what is the value that we offer? And for me, understanding the nuances of a business context and what ESG and sustainability looks like and the risks and opportunities it presents, those are issues of real value that lawyers can bring to the table.
Right.
And I think it's going to be, there's a fundamental opportunity there for us as legal professionals to use it, to not lose out to to the auditing and accounting profession who are moving into this space, but to really use our skills and our knowledge as problem solvers to apply this different lens to how we think about things. Just another point I wanted to just add quickly on artificial intelligence is, and connecting back to trends, is for me, I think increasingly ESG and sustainability really is about governance. And I don't mean governance in a traditional sense where we think of governance as a compliance kind of an issue. I'm thinking about how do we make decisions as a business and what policies and processes do we have in place to make sure that what our purpose is and what we say we're doing around sustainability, that we are actually doing that. And, in that way that we really are making money, because of course that's absolutely crucial, but by really contributing to challenges. And of course, I mean, I say that, and of course we know how hard that is. Yeah. And then I wonder about the potential of AI in terms of enabling certain processes, not to take away, because ultimately you would need the people to understand the different issues and make the decisions, but perhaps to enhance the access people have to the information they need to make decisions that really are in the long-term best interests of the business.
So important. I think AI is going to disrupt the legal profession, and let's hope it does it in a very positive and value add sort of way, rather than, I read something that said AI will not replace you as a lawyer, but not using AI, if you're not using AI, you will get replaced. So I thought that was really interesting. So with everything that's changing so much, regulations and AI and understanding of ESG. If I were to have you back a year from now, what would we talk about? What would be on our agenda? Anybody's guess, but whoever wants to go first can go first with this one.
I'll start. I think that, well, I'm still waiting for the tipping point. You know, I that we have so much momentum that's driving change right now. And I think we're getting close to the tipping point. I just looked at an article, the front page of The Guardian has a picture of a very, you know, the world on fire and real despair from scientists. And we have to acknowledge that that's a backdrop, but I choose to remain optimistic. So I hope that in the next year, there's increasing evidence that not only that draws more and more people and decision makers into these issues and harnesses their abilities to solve problems, but also focuses the mind, I would say. I also think that in a year we'll always be continuing to understand the unintended consequences of the solutions that we propose. And I think that these are myriad, they are geopolitical. The fact that China is processing so much of the minerals, and they're basically processing the transition, the energy. What does that do? How does that shift power? You know, those are the kinds of big picture issues that I think that in the next year we might see more discussion around.
Yeah, I think so too. Aimee, your thoughts?
By this time next year, we will have the results of a number of democratic elections, and there's been a lot of talk about what us not having them yet means for the world of sustainability and ESG. But I think the reality is that although who is governing and what their policies are may be more certain this time next year, what is likely not to improve necessarily in certainty is what that enabling environment is around sustainability. There's still going to be a lot of dissonance. There's still going to be a lot of disagreement. And at the heart of that is the fact that this is really hard. So yes, businesses are making commitments and starting to comply with the regulations they need to comply with. And in a sense, that's almost the easy bit. The hard bit is really making decisions that are in the long-term best interests of the business, which is not the way our structure of our economy and our businesses are set up.
That's right.
And so whether that's, you know, as a law firm deciding, you know, how do you work? Who do you work for? What kind of work do you do? In the context where you maybe have very powerful equity partners in a firm with very profitable practices doing work exactly as they're doing it now. Where is the incentive then to do things different when actually their drive is to be more productive, to bill more hours, to improve their kind of seat at the table? And of course, in a different but similar way, the same pressures exist within corporates. So really what we're talking about is it's almost like a schizophrenia, a corporate schizophrenia, where on the one hand, we're all agreeing that this stuff is important and we need to do it and it's crucial and science tells us we should have already done it and we're falling behind. But on the other hand, this reality that we have that you know, I'm thinking of some companies in South Africa who are involved in insurance and are recognizing the fact that climate change represents a very real risk and that claims are going to be increasing. And they now need to look at how they help their clients adapt with that, shifting, you know, the economics around how they price those policies to account for that risk.
Or whether or not they even write the policies, which is happening in the US. Some of the companies are just not writing like fire insurance for homeowners anymore in certain areas.
Exactly. But then at the same time, these large insurance companies have got large institutional investors in them who talk about responsible investing, and they're really at the crux of it and with the power to kind of shift and mobilize capital. And yet, again, going back to the structure and how things work, are they making decisions that incentivize perhaps difficult decisions that aren't profitable in the near to medium term for their beneficiaries? So that's really hard stuff that I'm hoping that in the next year we will develop our maturity in terms of sustainability so that we can start to think beyond compliance, more to what does this look like as a new way of doing business, and how can we actually benefit from it?
That's right. So given how hard this is, and all of us have been working in this space for quite a few years now, what keeps you going? What gives you hope, Christina?
Well, I'm going to bring you back into this conversation because I think the community you've developed around legal ESG it creates this forum where people can meet, discuss these issues, and grow. I also do work and was recently elected to the UK Board of Governors for the Global Alliance of Impact Lawyers, and did a summit that was fantastic and offered the same kind of camaraderie and collaboration that is so crucial to making progress in this area. So that's what gives me hope. It's working with other people and speaking the same language on these issues, and recognizing the sort of passion and effort that so many people, including you, Pam, and my really esteemed partner, Aimee, have in addressing these issues. And I know how smart they are. So that's, there's this sense that, okay, we got the right people working on this.
Well,
same back at you. Aimee, what gives you hope?
Yeah, I mean, I thought three things. So I'll start with people, because, and just build on Christina's point. I think the people who work in this community are so willing to learn and share and grow, and that is reflected so much in how Christina and I work together, how we work with you, Pam, how we work with other organizations. And for me, there is such opportunity in that if you think about what we can do together. Of course, as a mom, I think the other point I wanted to make is when I say people, I mean just the potential of people. And it's not just my children and their friends and how I see them talking about these kinds of issues, but it's kind of the everyday person that you meet in the street who are really dealing with some of the consequences of these issues, or, real difficulties around inequality, for example, and the resilience that they display in kind of overcoming those issues and continuing in spite of. I think what I would also say is that sometimes it's hard. Sometimes it's hard to have hope.
Yeah.
Sometimes I worry about how we're going to close this gap, this kind of dissonance between what we say we're going to do and what we know needs to be done, given how hard it is to actually do this. And I guess when that happens, that's when it's so wonderful to have Christina as a partner and to have other people in the community, because it's about trying to do two things at the same time. It's about trying to focus on that big shift that needs to happen. And of course, we want it to have happened yesterday. And then peace with the fact, I think, that different organizations are at different points on their journey. And so you've got to kind of just keep chipping away and hoping that if we're all doing that together, as professionals, as lawyers, as people, as humans, as citizens of the world, that we'll create the kind of world that we all want to see.
And that is a perfect lead into one of my favorite lines when I'm talking about working in this space. It is so rewarding because we all win if we all win.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks so much to both of you. This has been an incredibly insightful conversation. I'm sure our audience will really enjoy it. Thank you, Christina. Thank you, Aimee.
Thank you,
Thank you
Pam.
so
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.